We're back with Irish Illustrated Insider. It's Monday, September 5th. Notre Dame coming off a 16-14 loss to Northern Illinois. I'm Tim Priester with Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated, John Bryce from the Football Scoop. And we just spent some time with Marcus Freeman, a kind of fired up and determined Marcus Freeman. You would hope that he would be, but what happened on Saturday in the loss to Northern Illinois is well, in his words, they are still learning how to deal with success. They don't have to worry about this week as they go to Purdue to take on the 1-0 Boilermakers who had the weekend off. But I don't know. Whenever you're in situations like this, it's all just words. He said what he had to say, and obviously, Notre Dame's going to be in a much better space when they take on Purdue this weekend. But that's a little bit late.
What's interesting is those words appeared in Monday Musings in January, that Marcus Freeman's teams don't handle success. They respond from failure. Uh, they responded from every failure he's had. They have not responded well to success. John and I went through this at the very beginning of Irish Illustrated Overtime. I'd give the litany of responses to failure and failing to do so after successes. It is the mark of a successful, long tenured coach to deal with success, because you're supposed to be dealing with success every week, is how this thing goes, not just bouncing back from failure. I would fully expect them to bounce back from this loss and play well at Purdue, except I'm concerned about the offensive line, the quarterback situation, and a defense that will stack the box. I know we're going to talk about that Thursday, but my greatest concern is I think the team will be ready to play. I don't think they were ready to play last week. I hope they are capable of playing well enough to distance themselves from Purdue on the road if an injured Riley Leonard is throwing the ball behind an offensive line that's in its third game together.
Well, and I think, and we're all watching the game again, or either have completed watching the game again, or I'm still in the process or watching it really for a second or third time. How much of it is Riley not trusting his protection, which we heard Marcus talk about today? How much of it is quicker, shorter routes because of the inexperienced O-line? And how much of it is Notre Dame, when it calls it, has had multiple breakdowns that have precluded it from being able to do much to attack the ball downfield. We all saw Riley Leonard grimacing Saturday. We saw him alternately holding the left shoulder or the right shoulder. There's no way, after the two particular hits, one on the sack and one out of bounds very early in the game, that Riley Leonard finished that game fully healthy. We just got the player availability report for this week from Notre Dame. He's not listed on there in any way, shape, or form, which means they don't acknowledge there's anything wrong with Riley Leonard. But there's clearly something that held him back Saturday in that game against Northern Illinois, which again was frankly an inexcusable loss for Notre Dame for all the same reasons that I said Notre Dame had to go win at Texas A&M for it being year three. Notre Dame had to respond much better than it did because it's year three in that home opener against Northern Illinois.
Yeah, we are on high alert to see Steve Angeli on Saturday, and the only way that Notre Dame would have listed their starting quarterback Riley Leonard as injured would be if he were out for the week, and maybe even then they might have kept that under wraps. But there's no doubt that he was banged up, and so we'll see how they handle the quarterback situation. Tim O'Malley asked Marcus Freeman, and one of the reasons why we don't ask some of the questions that people say we should ask is because when we know the answer to it, you're not going to
Post
waste.
game especially, you mean?
Right, post game especially. I had somebody say, well, um, the media asked if Daniel Jones would be the starting quarterback next week. Daniel Jones has had years and years of inconsistency. Riley Leonard just beat Texas A&M. Notre Dame just lost to Northern Illinois, and asking that question at that moment is number one, if there's an answer, if he's going to provide an answer, what it's going to be. So you're not going to waste a question on that. And number two, you've got to let a coaching staff evaluate that. You can't ask that question in the immediate aftermath of it and expect to get a legitimate answer. But what do we know about the business that we're in? But I do want to talk about Purdue, and the concern with them. But here's some bad stats for Purdue from last year: 85th in scoring offense, 84th in passing offense, 98th in scoring defense, 95th in pass defense, 100th in third down conversions, 88th in red zone touchdown percentage. 99th in passes per attempt. I could go on, but they're not a very good football team. Now, I'm sure they're a little bit better in their second year under Ryan Walters. Marcus Freeman talked about what they're going to do defensively, and they're going to force you to pass the football. They're going to stack the box. So that's good. That's for Notre Dame. That's a good test for Notre Dame, and that's what they need to
It's a
do.
good test for Notre Dame. I'm
It's
not
a
sure it's a
good
good thing
test.
for Notre Dame.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, all things being equal, which wasn't the case last week. I understand that, but we would imagine that Notre Dame will bounce back. Having watched Hudson Card, his numbers, the guy from Austin, Texas, who is now the quarterback at Purdue, he completed less than 59% of his passes last year. His touchdown to interception ratio was 15-8. So he wasn't that effective. But when you watch film of him, and I know he played against Indiana State, but I've watched film of him, from last year. He's very mobile. He can do some real good things. And I realize I'm dipping into Purdue a little bit earlier than we want to, and I'll jump out of it then. But as we look ahead to Purdue, he can do some things with his feet, and he's a little bit dangerous. I'm sorry. Let's talk more about what we talked about at the press conference, and that is, first of all, injuries. Jordan Faison is expected back. We'll see exactly how much availability he has. Josh Burnham is questionable. He has an ankle situation, and that puts more pressure on RJ Oben to start playing like the RJ Oben that Notre Dame thought they were getting from Duke. He's not played to that level the first two games of the year. And Tim, we saw Jason Onye playing some defensive end over the weekend, and you think he'll be the guy that they elevate to the starting lineup if Burnham is not ready to roll.
Yeah, I do think it'll be Oben. It'll be interesting how they coach up. I'm sorry. I think it'll be Onye. I think it'll be interesting how they coach up Oben this week, because he did make one play, and I'm not being sarcastic here. He had an inside the 10-yard line, third down, kind of chased down the line, tackle. It was a gain of 6, but it forced a field goal.
It did.
I mean, you have to coach him up on that play, on making that play consistently, because I haven't seen him do other things. I still didn't see the tackle you guys saw in the Texas A&M game when I was trying to find it. But I think you gotta teach or coach RJ Oben. He's got to be able to play more than 16 snaps, because Onye can't go out there and play 40 snaps at a new position. He was helping them out last week. He's going to have to do it again. And I think Bryce Young, if at all ready, has to get a dozen snaps now. We're assuming Burnham is out when you're questionable with an ankle injury, hurt at the end of the game. Or limited. He could be limited as well.
Yeah, I think he'll be the way we saw him limp off the field, the fact that it cost his team a 10-second runoff. Josh Burnham's a very smart player. He had to be in a lot of pain to go down like that. So I think it'd be very unlikely we see him. I think it's incredibly important to note that the only defensive lineman who played more snaps this past Saturday than Josh Burnham was Riley Mills. That gives you an indication of how much Burnham has surged in that rotation, how much more they were beginning to rely on him. Boubacar Traore got around 20 snaps. I think he's got to continue to grow his role in addition to Bryce Young. They've got to get some more dynamics out there, especially when we see that they said that Northern Illinois made them run too much laterally, and you have to have your quicker players out there in those situations.
Getting back to your question, Tim, to Marcus Freeman about the quarterback situation, you asked if there was any point during last week's game whether he considered putting Steve Angeli in at quarterback in place of Riley Leonard, and he said, it's not that they don't have confidence in Angeli, but no, they didn't give consideration to it, and that's why we don't ask questions like that, especially after the game, because you're not going to get an answer that is of any meaning.
I wasn't really wondering if Steve Angeli was going to start this week. Of course not. I was wondering if I believe Steve Angeli and a prepared Kenny Minchey and a gunslinging CJ Carr who wasn't on scout team and a healthy Riley Leonard can pass you to victory a little bit with those. Mitchell Evans was open. Jaden Thomas was open. Chris Mitchell was breaking deep down the field. And if you don't want to throw it 50 yards when your arm hurts, you had 3 guys open on the right side. They were open shots to hit. And I just thought, Riley Leonard's playing hurt. If he's not, then he's just throwing exceptionally poorly. Either way, I thought Steve Angeli could get you to a victory. That doesn't mean you're benching Riley Leonard, your captain. It means this is not a good game. Let's win this game and get out of here and reevaluate. So I'm surprised it was never considered. I know one of our subscribers sent he was warming up after Leonard got hurt. I think that's just standard operating procedure when a quarterback's laying on the ground that you warm up your backup. But I'm surprised he wasn't considered because Leonard had a really hard day throwing, and I'm not saying his receivers didn't fail him at times. We know Jaden Greathouse had a big drop. But that last drive, even Jaden Harrison set them up. They had to go 28 yards in 24 seconds to kick a 51-yard field goal, 52-yard field goal. That is not a terrible ask in the college game with a veteran quarterback like Riley Leonard, or a quarterback that can drop back and hit two 18-yard balls.
Yeah, and he had
there.
he had it was hard to tell.
Yeah,
was
the
on
angles you never know how.
Right, but he had Collins open. I think it was Collins, and he missed him. And then he clearly had Mitchell Evans open, and
Yep.
Evans would have been able to step out of bounds. It still would have been the longest made field goal for Mitch Jeter if he converted it. But I mean, you can't. He threw 32 passes. I counted at least 6, and it could have been 8. I mean, about from 20 to 25% of his passes that he threw Saturday were inaccurate.
Or uncatchable balls, basically.
Yeah, right. And the 1,700th rated player in the class of 2021, Ethan Hampton, had no such accuracy issues, which we thought that would be the case going into the game, but he really wasn't under a lot of duress, and he did a really, really nice job. But it's the running game.
The game plan really helped Ethan Hampton and did not help Riley Leonard much.
There's no doubt about that. And Ontario Brown is a good running back. And I want to say this, not that this is not an excuse or anything, but I didn't feel like I said this enough. And all the credit to Thomas Hammock in that their attrition, they've got football players there. Their running back, a couple of their offensive linemen, their wide receiver, who we know can't throw the football, but he can catch it. Those guys could absolutely play for Power 4 teams. They lost 2 players to Power 4 programs in the transfer portal. One was their center that went to Louisville, and another was a defensive end that went to Florida. All the credit in the world for Thomas Hammock. I mean, there's at least 6 guys there that can play somewhere, that can play on a higher level, but they didn't leave Northern Illinois. So, real credit to them. That shows you the togetherness with a program in an era where those guys could easily have jumped, for NIL money, more NIL money, probably, of course, going to a Power 4 and a better opportunity, and they didn't. So all the credit in the world to those guys.
JB?
Yeah, I thought Northern Illinois was the obviously hungrier team on Saturday. We said going in that they would have some dynamic athletes. They have for several years now under Thomas Hammock. And yeah, he's a former player. That win meant everything to him. They get another opportunity contest in a couple of weeks at NC State. And suddenly, if you're Notre Dame and it's thinking way too far down the road, but you better hope Northern Illinois keeps winning as much as possible, because when you start talking about these scenarios, could Notre Dame get in to the playoffs still at 11-1 or at 10-2? If Notre Dame is to get into the playoffs as a 10-2 team, it needs Northern Illinois to go knock off NC State and keep winning football games.
And we've said all along they're a front runner in the MAC, along with Miami of Ohio and Toledo. And so, man, they were terrific. But how many times, I mean, we've seen, when Notre Dame lost to Marshall laid an egg the next week. Now they ended up.
I know.
winning.
I wish they were playing next week, because I'd be hammering the other team right now.
Now I believe Marshall went on to win 9 games that year. So they were a pretty good team. And we know they had a really good defensive line. But
we're somewhere where we're talking about needing Northern Illinois to win right now.
I hear you.
That's where we are.
But I mean, that's the reality.
It's true, but it's incredible.
And I think it's, like, as we discussed, I was just going to say, this team has not held fourth quarter leads at home, which is inexcusable. Yeah. And I don't think you can talk about needing to handle success in year 3 because you've just lost a game you had no business losing. I don't think those are, I just don't like what that says about where things are right now for Notre Dame.
I agree, but that's the situation they're in. That was what he had to address with his team, which is, he admitted that everybody hears about, okay, the schedule's conducive to winning the rest of them and all that. But if you really have the pulse of your team, that especially in this year, that kind of thing shouldn't be happening, can't be happening, and it did.
Tim, I want to follow up on that because it just
Please.
occurred to me. I think maybe he thought the way of having the pulse of his team was to have those physical practices. Like, I'm going to force the pulse of my team to be physical. But if you have ineffective physical practices where the offense doesn't do well, then maybe
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of mentioned we needed to have better practice in hindsight after
I
a month,
understand that, and I felt like he was talking to me directly because of some of the things that appeared on IrishIllustrated.com. But you can't. It does at the end of the day. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you were physical or not or whatever. But we do know that preparation dictates the outcome on Saturday. He said it time after time after time. He believes that. So whatever you did, it was wrong. It wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
Whatever the preparation was, it was wrong. And so you better find the answers to that because you missed your mark by 1,000 miles this past weekend. And 29 games into this, it shouldn't be happening, but it did. And you turn the page, and everybody's like, "Oh, the season's over, and I don't want to watch, and I'm done with this." You're welcome to be done with it, but Irish Illustrated is we're going to follow Game 3. We're going to preview Game 3, and we're going to talk about how Notre Dame can pick up the pieces and be 2-1, and then we'll go from there. We'll be right back with Burning Up the Boards, but because you're enjoying this podcast from Irish Illustrated, you also love the videos we're posting on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Be sure to look for us on those platforms. Give us a like, a follow, and a share with your friends. Coming back, Burning Up the Board, segment 2.
If you're coming to a game this season, you have to check out Game Day Your Way, Notre Dame's tailgate service provider. Game Day offers everything you need, including tailgate gear, catering, and even beverage delivery right to your spot. And their Irish Express transportation from Chicago allows you to tailgate while you travel to their all-inclusive party zone in South Bend. Let Game Day deal with all the hassle so you can focus on the fun. For tailgates, tickets, transportation, and more, visit GameDayYourWay.com.
Welcome back to segment 2, Burning Up the Boards. Our first question from ATL Bry. Leonard seemed to be impacted by injury affecting his ability to rush the ball. Without his running ability, he isn't a good enough passer to be one-dimensional, so why not make a change at quarterback? Do you think it was ever discussed? It has not been discussed.
Marcus Freeman said it wasn't discussed at the time. But I mean, obviously they were monitoring Riley Leonard's situation, but I mean, absolutely right. If he can't be the multi-dimensional running quarterback this weekend, then you should go with Steve Angeli.
Yeah, it said not discussed. We know Riley Leonard was banged up. We know Marcus Freeman point blank said today that Riley Leonard has to trust his protection more. He also said very flatly, Northern Illinois made some contested catches. We did not. I thought that was interesting. So, yeah, I think there's a multitude of variety factors here, but you're at a point in time because you lost that game. You have to do whatever it takes, no matter the circumstances, to win every single game left on your schedule. And if that means a switch there or somewhere else, you have to make that switch for the whole of your team, period.
That's how I felt in the fourth quarter. That's how I felt in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and I think somebody brought up about would Brian Kelly have made a change. I mean, a veteran head coach would be much more likely to press that button in that situation.
I also don't think you lose Riley Leonard with his attitude and his approach to sports and life. I think he'd pop right back in there. It would be absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Next question is from either Kavik or Savick. Do you think it was last week's preparation that caused the lackluster performance, or more the fact that ND focused on A&M all summer and could not recover in time for NIU, similar to Ohio State and Marshall 2 years ago?
I mean, I think they're kind of one and the same, aren't they? I mean, one leads to the other. And that is why they lost to Marshall. I mean, I talk about an inexperienced head coach at that time. That is why they lost to Marshall. But again, and I understand you put everything into beating Texas A&M, but this is college football. This is the way it is, and so you've got to be able to bounce back. And there just isn't an excuse. And if the players took it for granted, shame on them. If the coaches didn't do enough to prevent them from taking it for granted, shame on them. I mean, I'm sure they tried. Marcus Freeman is aware of a lot of those things and how a team, responds in a situation like that. But it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what the reason is. They were not prepared to play quality football. And the funny thing is, they have the long drive on the first drive of the game, and then they have the
That
long
happens
drive
every
to
time.
start.
That happened.
Right.
That was literally in my prediction of the game. They'll drive right down and score, but then there's going to be a giant lull.
O'Malley's prediction, what was that your who and what to watch?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed virtually exactly what was going to happen there. But I mean, I get the question, but it doesn't really matter. You can't do that. It once again was a team performance that reflected the inexperience of the head coach.
And again, it's year three. That cannot be the case. That should not have been the case. And we heard that they had very physical practices last week. They're set to continue those coming up Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. What we also have heard, all of us, I believe, is that just because they were physical doesn't mean they were good practices. And Marcus Freeman himself acknowledged today that maybe some things that we didn't do a good enough job of fixing in practice that we then expected to go out and execute on the game day. And again, that's not an encouraging sign either.
And look, if they were bad physical practices, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here because he looked me right in the eye today and said the performance wasn't because of the physical practices. But if you were physical last week and they were bad, then that's bad preparation, and then that's the bad choice, is it not? I mean, I don't want to look
in hindsight. Yeah, I'm saying I think he went into it thinking I'm gonna make it so they're focused.
Right.
But it didn't work.
And he was wrong. His approach was wrong. Then that's my whole point. I mean, Lou Holtz used to be physical as hell on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, but he also had enough experience to know, okay, this is not the right choice for my team at this time, and we're not going to. You can't do it every week just for the sake of saying that you're doing it every week. Again, I don't know what their practices were like. I don't know what he should or shouldn't have done, but the preparation was bad and the performance was bad, and therefore you've got to, like he said, we got to go back and reevaluate what our preparation was. Well, when you went back and evaluated your preparation and it was bad, I just, I don't even really want to talk about it anymore. I've gone around this over and over again, wrote a column about it yesterday. Your preparation sucked and your performance sucked.
I think there's two realities here, one of life and one of college football. Father Time is the only thing that's undefeated, but human nature covers the spread, guys. There was no chance. They were going to come out and smoke Northern Illinois. They shouldn't have lost. How many points of evidence do we need that this happens to college football teams that are good, bad, and indifferent?
And it was 28. It wasn't 16 or 18 or 17. It was 28.
It's not a humming. There was no way. I'm really surprised they lost the game.
Yeah, I am as well.
I think they all are pretty surprised they lost the
game. Yeah. Yeah. Question from Murphy. Bro, Priester will often make the comment that it's not only the Irish that play terrible when they lose. Sometimes the other team has something to do with it. I was impressed with both NIU's offensive play calling and execution. It wasn't just that Notre Dame was sloppy. How much credit do you give NIU for having a great game plan versus ND laying an egg?
I love their offensive game plan because I felt like sitting in the box, that press box, not coach's box, that Notre Dame was off balance defensively. It was like 2nd and 11, but you don't know what's coming here. They would run on 2nd and 11. Remember, I said to you at one point, I'm like, it's 1st and 25 for them. They had the one big personal foul. I was like, they should run 3 straight times to find out what happens
run
here.
For 11,
yeah, run for 11, run for 7, and see what you can do. I just thought they stuck to the plan beautifully, and they kept Notre Dame off balance, which is very hard to do. I don't remember the last time Al Golden was kept off balance. I guess first half against Clemson.
He was outcoached, man. I mean, he was flat out outcoached, and that happens even to the great ones, and we know that he's a great one. When I see, and I guess this is still a pretty good percentage, but when I see that NIU was 6 of 16 on 3rd down, I would have thought that it was even better than that, especially the second half when Notre Dame had the ball for 7 some minutes in the second half. They tripled their time of possession. The spot. Oh my God, that was the worst spot. That was the most homer call by an official ever.
That was really bad.
When and Notre Dame never would have gotten the ball back a last time. because they would have just run the football on first down. But that spot at the end of the game before the game-winning kick was just absolutely awful. And unfortunately for Thomas Hammock, there was nothing he could do about getting it overturned because they just didn't have a camera angle to prove it. But you didn't need a damn camera angle to prove it.
Yeah, and to that point, Marcus Freeman said today they had us moving laterally on defense, and his term he used was they caused us to play fitball instead of football,
Yeah,
just
it's
trying to
like
fit
that.
into spots. And again, if a team is doing that on Notre Dame, it completely neuters Notre Dame ability to be aggressive the way that we know Al Golden likes. That's what Notre Dame did so effectively last week to completely befuddle and disrupt Connor Wegman. But again, that's when you have to look at that and get some of your faster guys on the field, or you need more of the guys that are out there. A Bryce Young, a Boubacar Traore, those are the guys that have more speed and can cover ground laterally better for you.
You know what's the worst thing for a core of young linebackers? Having to play football.
Yeah,
And
that's a good point.
they really struggle. You know, Kaiser even struggled a little bit with playing football, and Bowen certainly did. KVA certainly did.
Oh yeah.
And
He struggled physically, which I found strange after his first game.
yeah, yeah, and even well, yeah, even Osbury missed some run fits,
Yeah.
but man, rewatching the game, and it verified what we saw from the press box. Jane Osbury's going to be a really good linebacker.
He is. I like to see
And
it.
you feel. Remember at one point, Tim, when it was him and Kaiser on the field, and it's like you just feel more comfortable with those two guys on the field.
It was this penultimate drive when he made all those plays, when he made the third
Yep.
down stop and the fourth down kind of pass defense.
Yeah.
CB Penn's fan. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
CMU Penn's fan, do you believe the offense lacks leadership? Its only captain is a transfer, and 2 starters from last year were told you were bench guys now, the 2 offensive linemen. Is there leadership lacking on the offensive side of the ball?
I don't think Riley Leonard lacks leadership. I think he lacks accuracy right now. And if he lacks accuracy and he's hurt, he also lacks the ability to run away from people because he stopped doing that after the first quarter.
Yeah, I don't think it's a leadership issue. I think it's a young offensive line that Riley Leonard has very gamely said he has all the trust in the world in, and said they did a great job. And Marcus Freeman said the same thing, and that's all well and good, but that doesn't mean there's an inherent trust there. And we heard Marcus Freeman also today acknowledge that Riley Leonard has to better trust his protection. I don't think it's a leadership issue. We've heard Joe Rudolph talk too much about what a great leader Pat Coogan is, regardless of whether or not he's a starter and Coogan's still playing on some special teams. So, no, I don't think it's a leadership issue. Now, I wonder, and TP asked Mike Denbrock about this last week, I wonder at what point does Denbrock maybe consider returning to the coach's box upstairs after being on the sidelines in a couple of these games? Does that become a factor? I don't know, but you have to explore all options when your offense is as putrid and disjointed as it was this past weekend.
I think it's a little bit of a leadership issue. I mean, when you don't have Joe Alt, and your best receiver, although they call him a leader, is the guy that wasn't here last year. It's such a young offensive line, and you pin your hopes on an offensive line. I mean, I'm just going to say a little bit.
Your tight end is not really 100% involved.
Mitchell, that's really, really key. If you had a fully healthy Mitchell Evans, I mean, he leads by example, but he's a leader out there too. So I'll say a little bit. It's just so hard when you've got an offensive line that goes into the game with 11 starts. But I wholeheartedly agree. This is more about your quarterback throwing 20 to 25% of his passes inaccurately. Chris Mitchell, we had heard a lot about drops, or we had seen a couple practices with drops, a couple of those slants. I saw somebody say, well, they need to run more slants. They did run slants to Mitchell, and he dropped a couple, or at least he dropped one. So leadership, yeah, they could use a little bit more, but it is what it is. And Riley Leonard has to lead by example more than by his voice right now.
Yeah. Riordan Charles 83 is part 1 of a question related to Do Your Job 23. Riordan asks, what is wrong with the D-line? I don't know. And Do Your Job asks, how concerned are you about the D-line going forward, particularly in the run game?
Well, I asked about the defensive line, Marcus Freeman, and specifically the interior defensive line. But when you're not getting production from Oben and you got to pop Jason Anya out to a position that maybe in the long run is his best spot, but he hasn't been playing there, and you don't have Howard Cross on a full-time basis, and Riley Mills is starting slowly once again, and you don't have Gabe Rubio. I mean, I don't think you're not whole as a group. And, a lot of times we get ripped on because, well, you guys said that they were, this and that in the preseason. Well, I just gave you several examples of why they're not whole as a defensive line. And so when we make those evaluations, it's with those guys in mind. And they're not playing great right now. They got pushed around a little bit in the middle of the line, which is why I asked about the possibility of playing a 302-pound Armel Mukum or a 320-pound Sean Sevillano Jr. I realize it's a stretch, but you're looking for bigger bodies in there. Heinish's game, and he makes some plays, but man, he really gets pushed off the ball, especially against a veteran line like that. So, they're not in a great spot. They need to get healthier. They need a full-time Howard Cross, and they need, more than anything, they need a full-time Howard Cross and a more active and the Riley Mills of the second half of last season.
Yeah. Now, Howard Cross did play much, much more this week, and I think he finished up with 53 snaps. And again, Riley Mills only had 58, so he was right there, almost snap for snap with Riley Mills. But I don't know how much those guys always played together, or if there's such known quantities now, especially more so Cross, that they're having some different things done to them. But Notre Dame needs its edge guys to step up as well to help make those interior guys more effective. And Boubacar Traore got 20 snaps. I'd like to see him get a few more this week, just because he seems to keep showing up. And again, he's so physically gifted that even if something's not initially perfect, he has the traits that allow him to catch up in pursuit and to still be a factor in some of those plays.
I always get the feeling when I look, you look out there and Cross isn't out there, you think,
I know.
it's like, I didn't realize he had 51 snaps, which is Northern Illinois had 65, I think it was. So that's a vast majority. But when you look out there and he's not out there, it's like, damn, Cross isn't out there. So you get a little worried when you don't have your best player on the defensive line out there. Looking to upgrade your wardrobe? Founded by Notre Dame alum Gal Wang, you've seen ESQ's custom clothing on the player walk and all of your favorite players and coaches. With over a decade of making the best bespoke clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt or bomber jacket, or that perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out esqclothing.com and book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention Irish Illustrated and get 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com.
Our next question is from Moby Onion. Why is Jadarian Price treated like a scrub? Why is he playing so few snaps? It is insane. I like the scrub word. Wow. That's tough.
I feel the same way. I do. I don't.
Back up. You could just say.
Yeah. And look, we understand that you give the ball to Jeremiah Love and he could score at any time. You realize that, but I still think that Jadarian Price needs to be more of a bread and butter guy in the run game. But they barely ran the football with the running backs this past week.
Yeah, it was weird.
And I think that's probably what's so frustrating is that Price only got 4 carries and he had 1 reception for maybe a yard. And Love had 11 carries, but those two guys combined on 15 carries put you up over 100 yards, or put you over 100 yards at around 103 yards, and averaged between 6 and 7 yards per carry. And so again, that speaks to the fact that we don't have an offensive identity that we have yet to see Notre Dame create, because they stopped running Riley Leonard almost exclusively in the second half, and they need Riley Leonard to run, and then they did not run those two guys who were very effective over the course of the game.
Jadarian Price, there's a lot to offer there, and he'll get his opportunities, but for whatever reason, And again, I think it's mainly because of the home run threat that Jeremiah Love
Yeah,
presents.
I think we need to ask Denbrock though if he wants
Yeah.
to get, and he's
No,
going to
it's
say,
a
"I want to
good.
get Jadarian Price more carries." Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's
Hey, and I
press conference
thought,
malpractice if he doesn't, because you can't say
yeah,
no. We don't want to get more carries.
I thought, they called on Aeneas Williams to be a pass protection guy. He did a hell of a job. He stuck his nose in there. He's not that big in stature, in height, and I thought he did a really nice job.
His best block, unfortunately, there were two blitzers, and he could only take out one. He's
Right,
He can't really
exactly.
take them both down, but that was well designed blitz package.
Exactly right. We have a question from Showtime 22 by one. How many games will special teams cost Notre Dame a win, given the very poor punting and newly blockable kicking game? Which parts can be easily fixed?
I definitely want to ask Biaggi. Go ahead, JB.
I was just going to say Rendell obviously is still very much adjusting, but he's had 10 punts through 2 games, which is too damn many. But he's dropped 5 of those inside the 20. So yes, he scared you a couple of times by not getting the hang time that we saw him get in the limited exposure we had to preseason camp, the most limited exposure we've had in Marcus Freeman's 3 years. But we did see him boom some kicks and have some very significant hang time. We've yet to see that on game days, and yet Notre Dame has been adamant that his op time is clean, that he's getting it off very quickly the way that they want to. But the field goal blocking, again, I know one of them, it was Coogan's guy. The other one was just had to be a low driving kick to see that. But, they were 3 for 3 the week before, and they were money on all those field goals the week before.
Yeah, I tried to point out some positives in the special teams because of the 2 block kicks. First of all, the second block kick, the most likely result of that kick was it was going to be blocked. We all know that going into the kick. And right after that he was going to miss short, and after that he was going to miss wide, and then after that he was going to make it. Those were the 4 outcomes: blocked, short, wide, and make. That's why when there's 5 seconds left, you're like, try a quick out, get a pass interference if he jumps it, and you do something there, but that's neither here nor there. Luke Talich forced a fumble. Notre Dame has to recover that in a desperate situation. Jaden Harrison, he had technically 2 quality returns. The last one set Notre Dame up to have to go 28 yards in 24 seconds with a veteran senior quarterback at home. You can do that. They didn't do it. All 3 of us did say we thought Harrison actually left some yards out there on those 2 returns, though, that he could have gotten more. The yards still helped.
Yeah, we still have not seen the explosiveness that we saw on the practice field, but I would imagine that is coming up. Luke Tellitz, man, you think about what could have been at that point, because Notre Dame, the fumble that he caused, because Notre Dame had a lead, and so you had an opportunity to, at the bare minimum, go up by 4 to force them to score a touchdown. They didn't score a touchdown in their last nearly 51 minutes of the game, and so that was another critical opportunity. But it summed up the entire day, that you had opportunities and you never fully took advantage of them, and so Notre Dame got what they deserved.
From Matthew Hebbs 14, I'm going to show this right to JB because I have no answer for you. Would you rather beat A&M 20-13 and have this loss to NIU at 16-14, or would you rather played respectively but lost to A&M 23-13 and went on to beat NIU 16-14? What would our national rank be if we lost to A&M but beat NIU?
I don't know how much different it would be from a national ranking standpoint, because you would have dropped 8 or 9 spots either way, and you probably wouldn't have moved very much for beating NIU. So you'd probably be in the 15 or 16 range. The rankings absolutely just don't matter right now. It was good for Notre Dame when they were number 5 a week ago and looked like they could have a chance to be the number 5 seed. The number 5 seed is completely off the table at this point in time. I don't know. I think from a program perception, you needed to beat Texas A&M more than losing to Northern Illinois. You should have never lost the damn game to Northern Illinois. And that's what we've spent this whole podcast talking about, is because it's year 3. You can't be figuring out how to handle success in year 3. But you needed to go win a game against a power conference foe like that on the road. I think that's still does more for Notre Dame over the course of the season as long as Notre Dame bounces back.
I agree with that, but I think Notre Dame would be higher if they lost. Let's say they lost the game by 3 points in the fourth quarter at Texas A&M, and then they beat NIU. I think they would. What are they, 18th? Is that right? I think they would be higher than 18th. But like you said, John, it doesn't matter where you're
Right.
ranked right now. You just got to play good football. If you win, I don't even want to say that. 'Cause
No, don't
no,
don't say it. Don't say it.
But
They
I
got to
mean,
win one.
as it
I would
relates,
just say, oh,
as
sorry.
as it relates to the question, if you won the 10, it would all take care of itself pretty well. You're right, John. They would not. They number 5 is off the table now, certainly. Now, if you had lost to A&M, number 5 would probably still be on the table, would it not?
Probably,
Potentially.
possibly, but I mean, they're in the same spot. If you lose to A&M, you absolutely then have to close your season with a win at USC,
Right.
or you have no standing to be a hosting team, in my opinion. So, road wins, non-conference site wins are supposed to carry significant weight. I don't know what the formula is for inexcusable home losses and what kind of weight they carry.
A lot of teams make it, JB. They usually win the championship after inexcusable home losses by 28 points. Hey, the 95 Irish were pretty good, Tim. They lost by 28 at home. Gonna guess Northwestern was a little better with the National Defensive Player of the Year and some other points on that team.
Yeah. We're going to wrap up with a question from Irish A2, and that is, how can we blame Brian Kelly for this loss?
That's outstanding. You should be answering this one, Tim. I know why you included it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah. It's just that I always bristle at the notion that all that Brian Kelly did was beat teams he should beat. All that Brian Kelly did was he won 30 straight ACC games. 30. I realize that he had difficulty with big wins, and I certainly understand why people feel the way they do about Brian Kelly, especially with the way that he lost. But he was a veteran coach, and we would have lost to A&M, and he would have beaten Northern Illinois, and they'd be ranked.
Matty Hebbs would have gotten his wish in our previous question.
And they'd be ranked a little bit higher because they didn't lose the game as a 28-point favorite. But Brian Kelly was a pretty darn good coach. He wasn't a great coach, but remember, he handed Marcus Freeman a 54-win program, the 54 wins in 5 years, and most coaches do not have the advantage at Notre Dame of taking over a program that good. So, Notre Dame was better off for Brian Kelly having been there than not having been there. There's no doubt about that, but I certainly understand why everybody feels the way they do about Brian Kelly.
I do blame him for the loss. Just going to say that out loud for no reason whatsoever. I've decided. And also, did you see the tweet? Kelly couldn't win the big ones, and Freeman can't win the small ones. That's the best tweet.
That would
how
be
about
accurate.
you say it's because Brian Kelly didn't force better recruiting at the quarterback position or the offensive line position, and that's why they've had to go to the portal back-to-back years. And
it was too good.
Well,
you got Joe Alt and Blake Fisher.
I think that has been said on our message board. And I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, again, that it's a whole other topic maybe that we end up delving into Thursday. But I said going into the season, 5th different starting quarterback in 5 straight years for Notre Dame. You have to have continuity at some point. You absolutely have to have continuity.
No doubt. And that's certainly the plan here moving forward, and we'll see how that all transpires.
Does Book have a COVID year, or did you already use that?
We may see the transition at quarterback sooner than we expected. But for now, we're just going to move on to Purdue, and Notre Dame needs to be 2-1. They need to have a good week of practice. Their preparation, has to be better. And I'm obviously going to have to wrap up because I just lost my voice. Until Thursday, we'll talk a little bit more about Purdue. Until then, Tim Priester, Tim O'Malley, John Bryce, this has been Irish Illustrated Insider.